London, 1912. Midnight creeps through the city like a silent thief. The cobblestones glisten with fresh rain, reflecting the dim glow of street lamps that flicker in the fog. A lone figure moves quickly through the shadows, a young woman, no more than 25. Her name is Victoria Blackwell. Beneath the brim of her wide Edwardian hat, her eyes dart left, then right. She clutches something in her hand, a gleaming 9-inch hatpin, sharper than any dagger. To most, it's just a fashionable accessory. Tonight, it will become something far more deadly. By morning, one man will lie dead in the gutter, and Victoria will stand accused in a courtroom packed with journalists, politicians, and society's elite, all desperate to hear the truth behind the secret in her hand. To understand Victoria's story, you must first understand the world she lived in, the Edwardian era. This was a time when women's fashion was grand, towering, and, quite literally, pinned together. Large, elaborate hats were the crown of every well-dressed lady's outfit. But keeping them in place required something long, sharp, and sturdy: the hatpin. A typical hatpin could reach up to 12 inches in length, its steel shaft thin but unyielding, tapering to a needlepoint. At the top, a decorative head, sometimes a simple bead, sometimes a gem worth a small fortune. On the surface, they were simply part of the outfit. But in a city like London, crowded, chaotic, and not always safe for a woman walking alone, a hatpin could become an improvised weapon. Newspapers of the time were full of accounts: pickpockets fended off, would-be attackers sent running, even a few men left bleeding in the gutter after crossing the wrong woman. It happened so often that in some cities, from London to Chicago, laws were passed forcing women to wear safety caps on the points, for fear they might be used as daggers. For some, the hatpin was a symbol of independence. For others, it was a hidden threat. And on that rainy night in 1912, Victoria's hatpin would prove to be both. Victoria Blackwell was not the sort of woman society could easily place in a neat, respectable box. She was the only daughter of Charles Blackwell, a wealthy merchant whose fortune was built on the bustling trade routes of the British Empire. Her mother had died when Victoria was still a girl, leaving her to be raised in a house of polished wood, fine china, and quiet loneliness. From a young age, she learned to navigate the rules of the elite, the tea parties, the polite conversations, the suffocating expectations of what a woman should be. But beneath the layers of silk and etiquette, Victoria had a streak of rebellion. While other young women spent their afternoons embroidering or playing piano, Victoria could be found reading scandalous novels, slipping into smoky cafes to listen to political debates, or walking alone through streets her father would never dare to enter. By the time she was 25, she was known for her beauty: tall, poised, with sharp green eyes that seemed to see straight through people. But beauty in Edwardian London could be both a blessing and a curse. Rumors followed her like perfume: whispers of a broken engagement, a mysterious trip to Paris, and a chance meeting with a man whose name no one dared say aloud in polite company. And so, when people saw Victoria walking alone through the foggy backstreets of London on that March night in 1912, they couldn't help but wonder: was she simply returning from an evening out, or was she on her way to meet someone? Someone dangerous. No one knew it then, but every step she took that night was leading her closer to the moment when her name would be printed in every newspaper in the country, and the sharp glint of her hatpin would pierce more than just fabric. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened, a patchwork of puddles reflecting pale light. Victoria walked quickly, her heels clicking against the cobblestones in an even, deliberate rhythm. Behind her, another set of footsteps. At first, they seemed casual, lost in the city's night sounds. But as she turned down a narrow alley, the echo followed, closer now, matching her pace. She didn't look back. Not yet. Instead, she adjusted her glove, the motion deliberate. Her hand brushed the brim of her hat, then slid down to the cool, polished head of her hatpin. The man behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, his coat collar turned up, quickened his steps. The alley grew darker, tighter, the air heavy with damp stone and coal smoke. Then she stopped. The man took 2 more steps before she spun around, fast enough that her skirts flared in the lamplight. For an instant, time froze. Her eyes locked on his, calm but unyielding. In her hand, the silver shaft of the hatpin caught the faint yellow glow, flashing like a blade. Then, the motion was almost too quick to see. Her arm darted forward, the point driving hard and precise. A gasp, sharp, shocked, escaped the man's lips. His hand flew to his side. His eyes widened, not with pain at first, but with realization. He staggered back, his boots scraping on the stone, before collapsing against the wall. The sound of dripping water filled the silence. Victoria stood perfectly still, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The hatpin, now streaked with something darker than rainwater, glinted one last time before she withdrew it, tucking it neatly back into her hat as if nothing had happened. Somewhere, a door slammed. A dog barked in the distance. But in this narrow, hidden stretch of London, there were only 2 people, one standing and one who would never stand again. By morning, Victoria Blackwell's name was in every paper from Whitechapel to Westminster. "Hatpin murder shocks London," screamed the Daily Express. "Society girl or silent killer?" asked the Illustrated Chronicle. The story had everything the Edwardian press loved: a beautiful young woman, a mysterious killing, and a weapon as unusual as it was dramatic. The police called it an investigation. The newspapers turned it into a spectacle. Within hours, witnesses began to come forward. Some swore they'd seen Victoria being followed, her pace quickening in fear. One woman claimed she heard her shout, "Stay back," before the man fell. Others told a different tale, that the 2 had stopped to speak under a lamplight, voices low and urgent, before Victoria suddenly struck. That version painted her not as a victim, but as an executioner. Scotland Yard was quick to release the man's name, Edward Harrow, a well-dressed clerk with a reputation for being in the wrong places with the wrong people. Digging deeper, the press uncovered whispers of illegal betting rings, missing money, and an underground network of criminals operating out of the East End. But the most shocking detail: Harrow wasn't just another name in the police files. He had connections to the Blackwell family. Victoria's father had once employed him. Some claimed Harrow had been dismissed for theft. Others insisted he knew secrets about the Blackwell business that were never meant to see daylight. The press devoured it all, turning speculation into fact with every new addition. By the time Victoria appeared for her first hearing, the streets outside the courthouse were a sea of hats and umbrellas, all craning to catch a glimpse of the woman at the center of London's latest scandal. Some shouted her name like she was a heroine. Others hissed it like a curse. For days, the courtroom had been packed to the rafters. Reporters jotted every word, every gesture, every flicker of emotion on Victoria's face. Most expected another day of dry witness testimony. But on the 5th day, everything changed. The prosecution called Inspector Harrington to the stand. He stepped forward carrying a small, padded evidence box. Inside lay the very hatpin Victoria had used that night, slender, elegant, deceptively simple. Harrington held it up for the court to see. "This," he began, "is no ordinary hatpin." With a deliberate twist, he separated the decorative head from the steel shaft. A faint metallic click echoed in the chamber. And then, he tipped it forward. Out slid a tightly rolled scrap of paper. The courtroom erupted, gasps, whispers, the scratching frenzy of reporters' pens. The judge's gavel thundered for order. Harrington continued, "Inside this hollow compartment, we discovered a message. Not written plainly, but in code." Over the next hour, the court heard how the cipher had been painstakingly broken by one of the yard's codebreakers. The words revealed a meeting time, a location, and a list of names that belonged to some of London's most prominent businessmen and politicians. It was the kind of message that could ruin careers or destroy lives. The police claimed Edward Harrow, the man Victoria killed, was the courier, tasked with delivering the message to an unknown recipient. What they could not prove was why Victoria had it in her possession that night. The defense argued she had acted in self-defense, unaware of what the hatpin contained. The prosecution painted her as a willing participant in a high-society blackmail ring, a woman who struck down the courier to keep the message from reaching its destination. And so the question hung over the court, heavy as the London fog. Was Victoria Blackwell the target or the silencer? After weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and front-page headlines, the jury returned with their decision. It wasn't a clear victory for either side. The verdict, not guilty. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some saw justice served, a young woman's right to defend herself upheld. Others muttered that wealth and beauty had bought her freedom. Victoria showed no visible reaction. She simply gathered her gloves, adjusted her hat, and walked out into the pale light of the London afternoon. She never spoke publicly about that night again. But the whispers didn't stop. Some claimed they saw her months later boarding a steamer to New York, her hat tilted low, the very same hatpin gleaming at her side. Others swore she remained in London, quietly moving among society's elite, untouched by scandal yet somehow always near it. What became of the names on that coded message, and who, exactly, the message was meant for, was never revealed. Today, only one trace of the case remains. In a small glass case at the Museum of London, an old hatpin rests on a velvet cushion. Its silver head is dulled with age, but the sharp tip still catches the light. Beneath it, a modest plaque reads, "Property of Victoria Blackwell, 1912. No mention of the trial. No mention of Edward Harrow. Just a quiet relic, holding a century-old secret." And perhaps that is Victoria's final triumph, that we are still asking the same question as the jurors did that day. Was she a woman defending her life, or a woman hiding the truth?